Dominic is the publisher of The Federalist, Dana Perino, co-anchor of America's Newsroom and co-host of The Five, and Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee Congressman, CEO of Empowerment and Inclusion Capital. Good to be in the same room. It's also good to see the option of no masks, which you can see the Speaker and the Vice President have taken. Dana, what about this?
Well, I do believe, as Martha said, the President is hoping that this could be a speech that helps him reset. But I do think that if you look at the polling numbers that Martha referenced, they are in the high 30s, really averaging in terms for the President's overall approval. And when you look across the board in terms of economy, immigration, inflation in particular, energy issues across the board, he's really far down, including on COVID. And the reason they're not wearing masks today is that this is a decision that they could have done weeks ago. And I said it before, they were going to wait to the State of the Union, and I don't think a lot of people will forget that. They could have done it weeks ago, and that includes for children. I do think that Ketanji Brown Jackson will provide a grace note tonight for the President, and Ukraine provides an opportunity for him to talk about something different. But I don't think that people have just formed an opinion about the President, they have formed a judgment.
As you look at the cabinet coming in, Secretary of State Antony Blinken
getting a big round of applause. We also saw General Austin, the Secretary of Defense, coming in. Obviously, a lot of focus on these individuals as we have been trying to navigate the very unsettling situation that's unfolding in Ukraine tonight. So a lot of focus on these two individuals.
Very quickly.
It just seems to me that this is going to be a speech in which the President has to deal with a lot of issues that a month and a half ago he did not think he was going to have to deal with when it comes to foreign policy. Handling those issues, how he approaches them, is going to be a real challenge. And I think that, in a speech that could have been short, sweet, and try to reset, he's going to have to deal with many more complicated issues than perhaps this administration thought.
Just about 10 seconds, quick thought, Harold.
If we can come together around protecting freedom and democracy in Ukraine, if I were the President, I'd ask the Congress, let's push the reset together and figure out how we come together and figure out how we get compromises to a whole range of things that we talked about.
All right, let's take a moment to listen to the action down on the floor as we pause for the top of the hour. President Biden, just minutes away. Our special coverage of the State of the Union address, his first, continues in just a moment.
And the Chief Justice, as they wait for the President to come in. We always watch the President come in, a long line of people shaking hands. Of course, that's not something that we saw the last time around, but this is expected to be a full house. Everybody is invited, and maskless, as far as I can tell so far.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything. The President will then lay out his agenda to those lawmakers and to you, the American people. We've been wondering what's in this speech, but we know for a fact that the war in Ukraine is going to lead this speech and may be significant throughout.
Indeed. Let's bring in White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich. Jackie, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Martha. Good evening, Brett. The President will start by calling out Russia and pledging support for Ukraine, and then he'll get to domestic issues that have dragged his polling, like crime and especially inflation. He'll pitch his agenda as a solution, and he'll try to strike a message of unity. Since taking office, he's faced this choice of uniting his party and passing his agenda, or uniting the country and disappointing his base. But tonight, with a war raging on the doorstep of NATO, it's not just the country that's listening, the world is also watching the President. Brett and Martha?
Jackie Heinrich, live on the North Lawn. You look at Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Ted Cruz, and another look at the Supreme Court justices. Let's bring in senior political analyst Britt Hume. Good evening, Britt. Your thoughts? We've been through a lot of these together, and you've analyzed the moment. This moment is a lot of political headwinds for this administration and this president.
Yeah, that's right, Brett. If you count all of them, including the President's address to Congress in his first year, I think this is my 46th. It's not easy to remember any of them because they tend to be long and programmatic and tedious, no matter who's giving them. There are a few moments we remember, but not very many. This time, I think the President will have a larger audience than he might otherwise have had this invasion in Ukraine had not occurred, so there'll be a lot of attention on it, which gives him an opportunity. He is obviously underwater in the polling, as you all have pointed out, by about as much as any president at this stage in his administration as I've ever seen. So he has a lot to do, or to try to do. But I'm most interested in hearing what he has to say about Ukraine, because this is an opportunity for leadership by an American president, where I think we've all awakened to the fact that perhaps our military alliances are not as strong as they need to be, given Putin's evident ambitions. and also obviously our energy situation in this country, but even more so in Western Europe, is not what it should be. And this is something about which the United States could do some things. If it undertook some things, it might be politically difficult for a Democratic president. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles those challenges.
So, Britt, when he talks about Ukraine, obviously there's so much to this story that hasn't been told yet. I mean, I guess at this point he could take some credit for bringing together the members of NATO, the coalition that has really come together, I think, in a more powerful way than anybody may have anticipated.
Well, I certainly do think that he'll try to take credit for that. It seems to me that what has happened in Ukraine has had an important impact in these Western NATO capitals, and these NATO countries were ready to act, or at least to act in unison, and they have done so. And the president, of course, has encouraged that. Whether he's actually led it is probably not important in the long scheme of things, but that certainly has occurred. And what's even better news is that they seem, particularly Germany, which has been so hesitant on military matters, to be prepared to beef up their security forces, to beef up their military, and perhaps now to wean themselves off of Russian energy, which would be an even more important contribution, partly because doing so would be a peaceful act. It would also weaken Russia, and it would make the West more secure, and would be good for the United States if the United States could help.
We're waiting on the House Sergeant at Arms, General William Walker, to announce the president to walk into the chamber. Britt, you know, we're talking about
the President of the United States.
Every once in a while, you can catch a little bit of the conversation as he makes the walk down. Britt, I went to that anchor's lunch today. They bring over some of the anchors covering the State of the Union. He was in a good mood, but a serious mood about Ukraine. The point I was making was we deal in chapters often in America, and the COVID chapter, as you look at all of these lawmakers without a mask, that just was announced Sunday for Capitol Hill. You know, and we think about all we've been through as a nation over the past 2 years, about following the science. The science has led us to this moment where the State of the Union is maskless.
Well, I'm not sure that the science has changed very much.
Well, that's what I mean.
72 or 96 hours, has it? But I think, whatever the reason, I think Americans will be glad to see this. You see one man there in a wheelchair who has a mask on, but he would be in the category of those most vulnerable. But I would simply say, Brett, that the COVID chapter seems, in terms of national restrictions and major national united actions, to be largely over.
Just watching President Biden and thinking about all the times, Brett, you talked about all of the State of the Union addresses that you have been to and covered. He is right up there, and he just handed a speech over to Nancy Pelosi, which reminds me of a moment when a speech got ripped up in recent coverage that we were watching. But now it's Joe Biden's turn to give the State of the Union address after a lifetime of service.
I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
very, very much. Thank you. Please. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, members of Congress and the Cabinet, Justices of the Supreme Court, my fellow Americans. Last year, COVID-19 kept us apart. This year, we're finally together again. Tonight, we meet as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, but most importantly, as Americans, with a duty to one another, to America, to the American people, to the Constitution, and an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny. 6 days ago, Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people. And President Zelensky, to every Ukrainian, their fearlessness, their courage, their determination literally inspires the world. Groups of citizens blocking tanks with their bodies. Everyone from students to retirees to teachers turned soldiers defending their homeland. And in this struggle, President Zelensky said in his speech to the European Parliament, "Light will win over darkness." The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is here tonight, sitting with the First Lady. Let each of us, if you're able to stand and send an unmistakable signal to the world of Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She's bright, she's strong, she's resolved. Yes. We, the United States of America, stand with the Ukrainian people. Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. They keep moving, and the cost, the threats to America and America to the world keeps rising. That's why the NATO alliance was created, to secure peace and stability in Europe after World War II. The United States is a member, along with 29 other nations. It matters. American diplomacy matters. American resolve matters. Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was premeditated and totally unprovoked. He rejected repeated efforts at diplomacy. He thought the West and NATO wouldn't respond. He thought he could divide us at home, in this chamber, in this nation. He thought he could divide us in Europe as well. But Putin was wrong. We are ready. We are united, and that's what we did. We stayed united. We prepared extensively and carefully. We spent months building coalitions of other freedom-loving nations in Europe and the Americas, from America to the Asian and African continents, to confront Putin. Like many of you, I spent countless hours unifying your European allies. We shared with the world in advance what we knew Putin was planning and precisely how he would try to falsify and justify his aggression. We countered Russia's lies with the truth. And now that he's acted, the free world is holding him accountable. along with 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, even Switzerland, are inflicting pain on Russia and supporting the people of Ukraine. Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been. Together, along with our allies, we are right now enforcing powerful economic sanctions. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks in the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. To technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and their corrupt leaders who built billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States, I mean it. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for you, ill-begotten gains. And tonight, I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding an additional squeeze on their economy. He has no idea what's coming. The ruble has already lost 30% of its value. The Russian stock market has lost 40% of its value, and trading remains suspended. The Russian economy is reeling, and Putin alone is the one to blame. Together with our allies, we're providing support to the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. Military assistance, economic assistance, humanitarian assistance. We're giving more than $1 billion in direct assistance to Ukraine, and will continue to aid the Ukrainian people as they defend their country and help ease their suffering. But let me be clear. Our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. For that purpose, we have mobilized American ground forces, air squadrons, ship deployments to protect NATO countries including Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And as I've made crystal clear, the United States and our allies will defend every inch of territory that is NATO territory with the full force of our collective power. Every single inch. And we're clear-eyed. The Ukrainians are fighting back with pure courage. But the next few days, weeks, and months will be hard on them. Putin has unleashed violence and chaos. But while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run. And a pound of Ukrainian people, proud people, pound for pound, ready to fight with every inch of earnings that they have. They've known 30 years of independence, have repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. To all Americans, I'll be honest with you, as I always promised I would be. A Russian dictator invading a foreign country has cost around the world. And I'm taking robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy, and that we use every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers. Tonight, I can announce the United States has worked with 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. America will lead that effort. releasing 30 million barrels of our own strategic petroleum reserve. And we stand ready to do more if necessary, united with our allies. These steps will help blunt gas prices here at home, but I know news about what's happening can seem alarming to all Americans. But I want you to know, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. When the history of this era is written, Putin's war in Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. But while it shouldn't, it shouldn't have taken something so terrible for people around the world to see what's at stake. Now everyone sees it clearly. We see the unity among leaders of nations, a more unified Europe, a more unified West. We see unity among the people who are gathering in cities and large crowds around the world, even in Russia, to demonstrate their support for the people of Ukraine. In the battle between democracy and autocracies, democracies are rising to the moment, and the world is clearly choosing the side of peace and security. This is the real test. It's going to take time. So let us continue to draw inspiration from the iron will of the Ukrainian people. To our fellow Ukrainian Americans who forged a deep bond that connects our two nations, we stand with you. We stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom, and he will never weaken the resolve of the free world. We meet tonight in an America that has lived through two of the hardest years this nation has ever faced. The pandemic has been punishing, and so many families are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of food, gas, housing, and so much more. I understand, like many of you did. My dad had to leave his home in Scranton, Pennsylvania to find work. So like many of you, I grew up in a family when the price of food went up, it was felt throughout the family. It had an impact. That's one of the first things I did as president, was fight to pass the American Rescue Plan. Because people were hurting, we needed to act, and we did. Few pieces of legislation have done more at a critical moment in our history to lift us out of a crisis. It fueled our efforts to vaccinate the nation and combat COVID-19, delivered immediate economic relief to tens of millions of Americans. It helped put food on the table. Remember those long lines of cars waiting for hours just to get a box of food put in their trunk. It cut the cost of health care insurance. And as my dad used to say, it gave the people just a little bit of breathing room. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan.
Boo.
The American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind.
Boo.
It worked.
That wasn't necessary. It was rather dumb to say it.
It worked. It created jobs, lots of jobs. In fact, our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year. More jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America. The economy grew at a rate of 5.7 last year, the strongest growth rate in 40 years. And the first step in bringing fundamental change to our economy that hasn't worked for working people in this nation for too long. For the past 40 years, we were told the tax break for those at the top and benefits would trickle down and everyone would benefit.
Here we got the same old, same old.
That theory led to a weaker economic growth, lower wages, bigger deficits, and a widening gap between the top and everyone else in nearly a century. Look, Vice President Harris and I ran for office, and I realized we had fundamental disagreements on this. but ran for office with a new economic vision for America. Invest in America, educate Americans, grow the workforce, build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down, because we know.
And you haven't done anything. You got us in a total mess, economically and otherwise.
Because we know when the middle class grows, the poor go way up and the wealthy do very well. America used to have the best roads, bridges, and airports on earth. And now our infrastructure is ranked 13th in the world. We won't be able to compete for the jobs of the 21st century if we don't fix it. That's why it was so important to pass the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I thank my Republican friends who joined to invest and rebuild America. The single biggest investment in history. It was a bipartisan effort. I want to thank the members of both parties who worked to make it happen. We're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure decade. And look, it's going to transform America, to put us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that we face with the rest of the world, particularly China. I told Xi Jinping, it's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. We'll create good jobs for millions of Americans, modernizing roads, airports, ports, waterways, all across America. And we'll do it to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice.
Oh, brother. What a bunch of BS. Goodness gracious. What about the $30 million you took from China?
Clean water to drink at home and at school.
The family. And Hunter.
Provide affordable, high-speed internet
Shameful.
for every American. Rural, suburban, urban, and tribal communities. 4,000 projects have already been announced. Many of you have announced them in your districts. And tonight, I'm announcing that this year, we will start fixing over 65,000 miles of highway and 1,500 bridges in disrepair.
And what about the wall?
Folks,
That the millions of immigrants have come in here illegally. Who's going to pay for all the funds you're giving to those people?
when we use
We can't afford it for our own
to
people.
rebuild America, we're going to do it by buying America. Buy American products. Support American jobs. The federal government spends about $600 billion a year to keep this country safe and secure. There's been a law on the books for almost a century to make sure taxpayers' dollars support American jobs and businesses. Every administration, Democrat or Republican, says they'll do it, but we're actually doing it. We'll buy America to make sure everything from the deck of an aircraft carrier to the steel on highway guardrails is made in America from beginning to end, all of it.
What about our energy, Mr. President? The pipeline, Mr. President.
But folks, to compete for the jobs of the future, we also need a level playing field with China and other competitors. That's why it's so important to pass the Bipartisan Innovation Act sitting in Congress that will make record investments in emerging technologies and American manufacturing. We used to invest almost 2% of our GDP in research and development. We don't now. Canada, China is. Let me give you one example why it's so important to pass. If you travel 20 miles east of Columbus, Ohio, you'll find 1,000 empty acres of land. It won't look like much, but if you stop and look closely, you'll see a field of dreams, the ground on which America's future will be built. That's where Intel, the American company that helped build Silicon Valley, is going to build a $20 billion semiconductor megasite, up to 8 state-of-the-art factories in one place, 10,000 new jobs. And in those factories, the average job about $135,000 a year. some of the most sophisticated manufacturing in the world, to make computer chips the size of a fingertip, that power the world in everyday lives, from smartphones, technology to the internet, technology is yet to be invented. But that's just the beginning. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger, who's here tonight, I don't know where Pat is. Pat, there you go, Pat, stand up. Pat. Pat came to see me and he told me they're ready to increase their investment from 20 billion to 100 billion. That would be the biggest investment in manufacturing in American history. And all they're waiting for is for you to pass this bill. So let's not wait any longer. Send it to my desk, I'll sign it, and we'll really take off.
Let's read what's in it first, Mr. President.
Folks, Intel is not alone. There's something happening in America. Just look around and you'll see an amazing story. The rebirth of pride that comes from stamping products made in America. The revitalization of American manufacturing. Companies are choosing to build new factories here, when just a few years ago they would have gone overseas. That's what's happening. Ford is investing $11 billion in electric vehicles, creating 11,000 jobs across the country. GM is making the largest investment in its history. $7 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 4,000 jobs in Michigan. All told, 369,000 new manufacturing jobs were created in America last year alone. Folks, powered by people I've met like JoJo Burgess, from generations of union steelworkers in Pittsburgh, who's here tonight. Where are you, JoJo? There you go. Thanks, buddy. As Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown says, it's time to bury the label Rust Belt. It's time to see the what used to be called a Rust Belt become the home of a significant resurgence of manufacturing. And with all the bright spots in our economy, record job growth, higher wages, too many families are struggling to keep up with their bills. Inflation is robbing them of gains they thought otherwise they would be able to feel. I get it. That's why my top priority is getting prices under control. Look, our economy roared back faster than almost anyone predicted. But the pandemic meant that businesses had a hard time hiring enough people because of the pandemic to keep up production in their factories. So you didn't have people making those beams that went into buildings because they were out. The factory was closed. The panic also disrupted the global supply chain. Factories close. When that happens, it takes longer to make goods and get them to the warehouses, to the stores, and prices go up. Look at cars last year. 1/3 of all the inflation was because of automobile sales. There weren't enough semiconductors to make all the cars that people wanted to buy. And guess what? Prices of automobiles went way up, especially used vehicles as well. And so we have a choice. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. I think I have a better idea to fight inflation. Lower your costs, not your wages. Folks, that means make more cars and semiconductors in America, more infrastructure and innovation in America, more goods moving faster and cheaper in America, more jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America. Look.
What about energy, Mr. President?
Economists.
Electricity, oil, gas.
thus increasing the productive capacity of our economy. I call it building a better America. My plan to fight inflation will lower your cost and lower the deficit. 17 Nobel laureates in economics said my plan will ease long-term inflationary pressures. Top business leaders, and I believe most Americans, support the plan. And here's the plan. First, cut the cost of prescription drugs. We pay more for the same drug produced by the same company in America than any other country in the world. Just look at insulin. 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. In Virginia, I met a 13-year-old boy, the handsome young man standing up there, Joshua Davis. He and his dad both have type 1 diabetes, which means they need insulin every single day. Insulin costs about $10 a vial to make. That's what it costs the pharmaceutical company. But drug companies charge families like Joshua and his dad up to 30 times that amount. I spoke with Joshua's mom. Imagine what it's like to look at your child who needs insulin to stay healthy and have no idea how in God's name you're going to be able to pay for it. What it does to your family, but what it does to your dignity, your ability to look your child in the eye, to be the parent you expect yourself to be. I really mean to think about that. That's what I think about. You know, yesterday, Joshua's here tonight, but yesterday was his birthday. Happy birthday, buddy, by the way. So Joshua and 200,000 other young people with type 1 diabetes, let's cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month. So everyone can afford it.
Mr. President, you've been there 39 years. Why haven't you already done something about it? Talk is cheap. Action is what is
I know we have great
needed.
disagreements on this floor with this. Let's let Medicare negotiate the price of prescription drugs. They already set the price for VA drugs. Look, the American Rescue Plan is helping millions of families with Affordable Care Act plans to save them $2,400 a year on their health premiums. Let's close the coverage gap and make these savings permanent. And second, let's cut energy costs for families, an average of $500 a year by combating climate change. Let's provide an investment tax credits to weatherize your home and your business, to be energy efficient and get a tax credit for it. Double America's clean energy production in solar, wind, and so much more. Lower the price of electric vehicles, saving another $80 a month that you're not going to have to pay at the pump. Folks, the third thing we can do to change the standard of living for hardworking folks is cut the cost of child care. Cut the cost of child care. Folks, if you live in a major city in America, you pay up to $14,000 a year for child care per child. I was a single dad for 5 years, raising 2 kids. I had a lot of help, though. I had a mom, a dad, a brother, and a sister that really helped. But middle class and working folks shouldn't have to pay more than 7% of their income to care for the young children. My plan would cut the cost of child care in half for most families and help parents, including millions of women who left the workforce during the pandemic because they couldn't afford child care, to be able to get back to work, generating economic growth. But my plan doesn't stop there. It also includes home and long-term care, more affordable housing, pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. All these will lower costs to families. And under my plan, nobody, let me say this again, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in new taxes. Not a single penny. guess is if we took a secret ballot in this floor, that we'd all agree that the present tax system ain't fair. We have to fix it. I'm not looking to punish anybody. But let's make corporations and wealthy Americans start paying their fair share. Look, last year...
39 years you've been there, buddy. Why haven't you done it? Give me a break. You think we're going to believe that?
And my distinguished Congresswoman, we come from the land of corporate America. There are more corporations incorporated in America than every other state in America combined. And I still won 36 years in a row. The point is, even they understand they should pay just a fair share. Last year, 55 of the Fortune 500 companies earned $40 billion in profit and paid zero in federal taxes. Now look, it's not fair. That's why I proposed a 15% minimum tax rate for corporations. We've got, and that's why in the G7 and other meetings overseas we're able to put together, I was able to be somewhat helpful, 130 countries agree on a global minimum tax rate. So companies can't get out of paying their taxes at home by shipping jobs in factories overseas. It'll raise billions of dollars. That's why I propose closing loopholes for the very wealthy who pay a lower tax rate than a teacher and a firefighter. So that's my plan, but we have to go in more detail later. We will grow the economy, lower the cost of families. So what are we waiting for? Let's get this done. We all know we've got to make changes. Folks.
What about illegal immigration? What about the pipeline?
Show my nominees from the Federal Reserve, which plays a critical role in fighting inflation. My plan will not only lower costs and give families a fair shot, it will lower the deficit. The previous administration not only ballooned the deficit with those tax cuts for the very wealthy and corporations, it undermined the watchdogs, the job of those to keep pandemic relief funds being wasted. Remember we had those debates about whether or not those watchdogs should be able to see every day how much money was being spent, where was it going to the right place? In my administration, the watchdogs are back. And we're going to go after the criminals who stole billions of relief money meant for small business and millions of Americans. Tonight I'm announcing that the Justice Department will soon name a chief prosecutor for pandemic fraud.
2 years too late, unfortunately.
I think we all agree, thank you. By the end of this year, the deficit will be down to less than half of what it was before I took office. The only president ever to cut the deficit by more than $1 trillion in a single year. Lowering your cost also meant demanding more competition. I'm a capitalist. But capitalism without competition is not capitalism. Capitalism without competition is exploitation. It drives up profits. Corporations have to compete. Their profits go up and your prices go up when they don't have to compete. Small businesses and family farmers and ranchers, I need not tell some of my Republican friends from those states. Guess what? You got 4 basic meat packing facilities. That's it. You play with them or you don't get to play at all. And you pay a hell of a lot more. A hell of a lot more because there's only 4. See what's happening with ocean carriers and moving goods in and out of America. During the pandemic, about half a dozen or less foreign-owned companies raised prices by as much as 1,000% and made record profits. Tonight, I'm announcing a crackdown on those companies overcharging American businesses and consumers. Folks, and as Wall Street firms take over more nursing homes, quality in those homes has gone down and costs have gone up. That ends on my watch. Medicare is going to set higher standards for nursing homes, and make sure loved ones get the care they deserve and that they inspect and they will look at closely. We're also going to cut costs to keep the economy going strong and giving workers a fair shot, provide more training and apprenticeships, hire them based on skills, not just their degrees. Let's pass the Paycheck Fairness Act and pay leave. Raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and extend the child tax credit so no one has to raise a family in poverty. Let's increase Pell Grants, increase our historic support for HBCUs, and invest in what
Pie in the sky.
the First Lady who teaches full-time calls America's best kept secret, community colleges. Look, let's pass the PRO Act. When a majority of workers want to form a union, they shouldn't be able to be stopped. When we invest in our workers and we build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out together, we can do something we haven't done in a long time. Build a better America. For more than 2 years, COVID has impacted every decision in our lives and the life of this nation. And I know you're tired, frustrated, and exhausted. That doesn't even count the close to 1 million people who sit at a dining room table or a kitchen table and look at an empty chair because they lost somebody. But I also know this, because of the progress we made, because of your resilience and the tools that we have been provided by this Congress, tonight I can say we're moving forward safely back to more normal routines. We've reached a new moment in the fight against COVID-19, where severe cases are down to a level not seen since July of last year. Just a few days ago, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued a new mask guidelines. Under the new guidelines, most Americans in most of the country can now go mask-free. And based on projections, more of the country will reach a point across the next couple of weeks. And thanks to the progress we've made in the past year, COVID-19 no longer need control our lives. I know some are talking about living with COVID-19, but tonight I say that we never will just accept living with COVID-19. We'll continue to combat the virus as we do other diseases. And because this virus mutates and spreads, we have to stay on guard. And here are 4 common sense steps as we move forward safely, in my view. First, stay protected with vaccines and treatments. We know how incredibly effective vaccines are. If you're vaccinated and boosted, you have the highest degree of protection. We'll never give up on vaccinating more Americans. Now, I know parents with kids under 5 are eager to see their vaccines authorized for their children. Scientists are working hard to get that done, and we'll be ready with plenty of vaccines if and when they do. We're all ready. We are also ready with antiviral treatments. If you get COVID-19, the Pfizer pill reduces your chances of ending up in the hospital by 90%. I've ordered more pills than anyone in the world has. Pfizer is working overtime to get us 1 million pills this month and more than double that next month. And now we're launching the Test to Treat initiative. So people can get tested at a pharmacy, and if they prove positive, receive the antiviral pills on the spot at no cost. Folks, if you're immunocompromised or have some other vulnerability, we have treatments and free high-quality masks. We're leaving no one behind or ignoring anyone's needs as we move forward. On testing, we've made hundreds of millions of tests available, and you can order them for free to your doorstep. And we've already ordered free tests. If you already ordered free tests tonight, I'm announcing you can order another group of tests. Go to covidtest.gov starting next week, and you can get more tests. Second, we must prepare for new variants. Over the past, we've gotten much better at detecting new variants. If necessary, we'll be able to develop new vaccines within 100 days instead of maybe months or years. And if Congress provides the funds we need, we'll have new stockpiles of tests, masks, pills ready if needed. I can't promise a new variant won't come, but I can promise you we'll do everything within our power to be ready if it does. Third, we began the shutdown of schools and businesses. We have the tools we need. It's time for America to get back to work and fill our great downtowns again with people. People working from home can feel safe and begin to return to their offices. We're doing that here in the federal government. The vast majority of federal workers will once again work in person. Our schools are open. Let's keep it that way. Our kids need to be in school. With 75% of adult Americans fully vaccinated and hospitalizations down by 77%, most Americans can remove their masks and stay in the classroom and move forward safely. We achieved this because we provided free vaccines, treatments, tests, and masks. Of course, continuing this costs money, so I'll not surprise you. I'll be back to see y'all. And I'm going to soon send a request to Congress. The vast majority of Americans have used these tools and may want again. We may need them again, so I expect Congress, and I hope we'll pass that quickly. Fourth, we'll continue vaccinating the world. We've sent 475 million vaccine doses to 112 countries, more than any nation on earth. We won't stop. Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases. You know, we've lost so much in COVID-19. Time with one another. The worst of all, much the loss of life. Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing line. See it for what it is, a god-awful disease. Let's stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other for who we are, fellow Americans. Look.
Well, change your policies. I've had no mention of illegal immigration, building the wall, the borders. We can't even protect our own borders thanks to you, Mr. President. Shame on you.
Change how divided we've been. It was a long time in coming. But we can change how to move forward on COVID-19 and other issues that we must face together. I recently visited the New York City Police Department days after the funerals of Officer Wilbur Mora and his partner, Officer Jason Rivera. They were responding to a 9/11 call when a man shot and killed him with a stolen gun. Officer Mora was 27 years old. Officer Rivera was 22 years old. Both Dominican Americans who grew up in the same streets that they later chose to patrol as police officers. I spoke with their families, and I told them that we were forever in debt for their sacrifices, and will carry on their mission to restore the trust and safety that every community deserves. Like some of you that have been around for a while, I've worked with you on these issues for a long time. I know what works. Investigating crime prevention and community policing, cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety. Let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together and protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body cameras, banned chokeholds, and restricted no-knock warrants for its officers. That's why the American Rescue Plan that you all provided $350 billion that cities, states, and counties can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies. Proven strategies like community violence interruption, trusted messengers, breaking the cycle of violence and trauma, giving young people some hope. We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
Man, to see you change your mind on that one, Mr. President.
Fund them with resources and training. resources and training they need to protect our communities. I ask Democrats and Republicans alike to pass my budget and keep our neighborhoods safe. And we'll do everything in my power to crack down on gun trafficking of ghost guns that you can buy online, assemble at home, no serial numbers, can't be traced. I ask Congress to pass proven measures to reduce gun violence, pass universal background checks. Why should anyone on the terrorist list
Nonsense.
be able to purchase a weapon? Why?
What about the Crimea over there? That's exactly what socialists want to do, be able to take your guns away from you.
High-capacity magazines hold up to 100 rounds.
The right to bear arms is in the Constitution, Mr. President.
Kevlar vests?
It is to protect our rights.
Repeal the liability shield that makes gun manufacturers the only industry in America that can't be sued. The only one.
Shame on you.
Imagine had we done that with the tobacco manufacturers. These laws don't infringe on the Second Amendment.
Yes, they
save
do.
lives. The most fundamental right in America is the right to vote.
Ask the Crimeans.
And look,
Well, the dictator is trying to take over their whole country.
state after state, new laws have been passed. Not only to suppress the vote, we've been there before, but to subvert the entire election. We can't let this happen. Tonight I call on the Senate to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, pass the
Wrong.
Voting Rights Act.
Now you're getting right into the real issue. You wouldn't even be president of the United States if the rich, multi-billion-dollar high-tech companies and the unions had put together a strategy to cheat on the election
Justice Breyer,
with bogus money.
constitutional scholar, retiring Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Justice Breyer, thank you for your service. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mean it. Get up, stand on the street. Thank you. We all know, no matter what your ideology, we all know one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has is nominating someone to serve on the United States Supreme Court. As I did 4 days ago, I've nominated the Circuit Court of Appeals, Ketanji Brown Jackson,
Who supports the murder of innocent babies
who continue
in abortions.
Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence. A former top litigator in private practice, a former federal public defender, from a family of public school educators and police officers.
Those are
She's a consensus
ultra-liberal.
builder. Since she's been nominated, she's received a broad range of support, including the Fraternal Order of Police and former judges supported by Democrats and Republicans. Folks, if we're to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system.
When are you going to do it, Mr. President? You haven't done it so far, and you've been in for over a year.
As you might guess, I think we can do both. At our border, we've installed new technology like cutting-edge scanners to better detect drug smuggling. We've set up joint patrols in Mexico and Guatemala to catch more human traffickers. We're putting in place dedicated immigration judges in a significant larger number, so families fleeing persecution and violence can have their cases heard faster, and those who don't legitimately hear can be sent back. We're screening, we're securing commitments, and supporting partners in South and Central America to host more refugees and secure their own borders. We can do all this while keeping lit the torch of liberty that has led the generation of immigrants to this land, my forebears and many of yours. Provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those with temporary status, farm workers, essential workers. Revise our laws
Shame on you.
so businesses have workers they need, and families don't wait decades to read.
Close the doors.
It's not only the right thing to do, it's economically smart thing to do.
Legal immigration,
That's
not
why the immigration
illegal
reform is
immigration.
supported by everyone from labor unions to religious leaders to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Let's get it done once and for all. Folks,
30-some years you've been there, Mr. President. What have you done?
Advancing liberty and justice also requires protecting the rights of women. The constitutional right affirmed by Roe v. Wade, standing precedent for half a century, is under attack as never before. If you want to go forward, not backwards, we must protect access to health care, preserve a woman's right to choose, and continue to advance maternal health care for all Americans.
Just an abortion promoter.
For our LGBTQ plus Americans, let's finally get the Bipartisan Equality Act to my desk. The onslaught of state laws targeting transgender Americans and their families.
Yes, and you're trying to transfer that right into our school systems.
I said last year, especially to our younger transgender Americans, I'll always have your back as your president. So
Shame
you can
on
be
you.
yourself and reach your God-given potential. Folks,
The National Education Association is supporting abortions, at the same time trying to produce
just
the
demonstrated all
Lawn Boy
do not agree.
and the
And that
queer
we do agree on a lot more
memoir
things than we acknowledge.
books in our school
I
systems,
signed 80 bipartisan bills into law last year.
including right
From
here in
government
Kentucky.
shutdowns, protecting Asian Americans from still too common hate crimes, to reform
Shameful.
military justice, and will soon be strengthening the Violence Against Women Act that I first wrote 3 decades ago. It's important. It's important for us to show the nation we can come together and do big things. Tonight I'm offering a unity agenda for the nation. 4 big things we can do together, in my view. First, beat the opioid epidemic.
Well, seal the borders up then, buddy. Goodness gracious, shame on you.
Funding for prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery. Get rid of outdated rules and stop doctors stop doctors prescribing treatments. Stop the flow of illicit drugs by working with state and local law enforcement to go after the traffickers. And if
Where
you're
do you think
suffering
they're coming from?
addiction,
The border.
you should know you're not alone. I believe in recovery, and I celebrate the 23 million Americans in recovery. Second, let's take on mental health, especially among our children whose lives and education have been turned upside down. American Rescue Plan gave schools money to hire teachers and help students make up for lost learning. I urge every parent to make sure your school does just that. Have the money. We can all play a part. Sign up to be a tutor or a mentor. Children were also struggling before the pandemic. Bullying, violence, trauma, and the harms of social media. As Frances Haugen, who is here tonight with us, has shown, we must hold social media platforms accountable for the national experiment they're conducting on our children for profit. Folks, thank you. Thank you for the courage you showed. It's time to strengthen privacy protections. Ban targeted advertising to children. Demand tech companies stop collecting personal data on our children. And let's get all Americans the mental health services they need. More people can turn for help and full parity between physical and mental health care if we treat it that way in our insurance. Look, the third piece of that agenda is support our veterans. Veterans are the
Yeah, quit teaching to having them
of this country.
act out their
The best of us.
race relations
I've
with
always believed
lies.
that we have a sacred obligation to equip those we send to war and care for those in their family when they come home. My administration providing assistance in job training, housing, and now helping lower-income veterans get VA care debt-free. And our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan face many dangers. One being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there. I've been in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan over 40 times. these burn pits that incinerate waste, the waste of war, medical and hazardous material, jet fuel, and so much more. And they come home. Many of the world's fittest and best trained warriors in the world. Never the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those soldiers was my son, Major Bo Biden. I don't know for sure if the burn pit that he lived near, that his hooch was near, in Iraq and earlier than that in Kosovo, is the cause of his brain cancer, the disease of so many other troops. But I am committed to find out everything we can, committed to military families like Danielle Robinson from Ohio, the widow of Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson. He was born a soldier, Army National Guard, combat medic in Kosovo and Iraq, stationed near Baghdad, just yards from burn pits the size of football fields. Danielle is here with us tonight. They love going to Ohio State football games. We love building Legos with their daughter. But cancer from prolonged exposure to burn pits ravaged Heath's lungs and body. Danielle says Heath was a fighter to the very end. He didn't know how to stop fighting, and neither did she. Through her pain, she found purpose to demand that we do better. Tonight, Danielle, we are going to do better. The VA is pioneering new ways of linking toxic exposure to disease, already helping more veterans get benefits. And tonight, I'm announcing we're expanding eligibility to veterans suffering from 9 respiratory cancers. I'm also calling on Congress to pass a law to make sure veterans devastated by toxic exposure in Iraq and Afghanistan finally get the benefits and the comprehensive health care.
I noticed that Nancy's tickled pink. She's at least not tearing up his speech like she did President Donald Trump.
Let's end cancer as we know it. This is personal. This is personal to me, to Jill, and to Kamala, and so many of you. So many of you have lost someone you love. Husband, wife, son, daughter, mom, dad. Cancer is the number 2 cause of death in America, second only to heart disease. Last month, I announced the plan to supercharge the cancer moonshot that President Obama asked me to lead 6 years ago. Our goal is to cut cancer death rates by at least 50% over the next 25 years. I think we can do better than that. Turn cancers from death sentences into treatable diseases. More support for patients and their families. To get there, I call on Congress to fund what I call ARPA-H, Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. Pattern after DARPA in the Defense Department. Projects that led in DARPA to the internet, GPS, and so much more to make our forces more safer and be able to wage war more with more clarity. ARPA will have a singular purpose: to drive breakthroughs in cancer, Alzheimer's and diabetes, and more. A unity agenda for the nation. We can do these things. It's within our power, and I don't see a partisan edge to any one of those 4 things. My fellow Americans, tonight, we've gathered in this sacred space, the citadel of democracy, in this Capitol. Generation after generation of Americans have debated great questions amid great strife and have done great things. We fought for freedom, expanded liberty, debated totalitarianism and terror. We built the strongest, freest, and most prosperous nation the world has ever known. Now is the hour, our moment of responsibility, our test of resolve and conscience, of history itself. It is in this moment that our character of this generation is formed. Our purpose is found. Our future is forged. Well, I know this nation. We'll meet the test, protect freedom and liberty, expand fairness and opportunity, and we will save democracy. As hard as those times have been, I'm more optimistic about America today than I've been my whole life, because I see the future that's within our grasp, because I know there's simply nothing beyond our capacity. We're the only nation on earth that has always turned every crisis we faced into an opportunity. The only nation that can be defined by a single word, possibilities. So on this night, on our 245th year as a nation, I've come to report on the state of the nation, the state of the union. And my report is this: the state of the union is strong because you, the American people, are strong. We are stronger today.
I hate to tell you, Mr. President, you missed the boat. We are strong because we have a foundation based upon godly principles, and we've slipped away from it with your help, including aborting children.
As one people, one America, the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our truth. Thank you. Go get him.
Okay, the speech is about an hour and 2 minutes, give or take a little bit. President Biden giving his first State of the Union address. There was a lot of talk this week that maybe they would have to rip up this speech, rewrite it, given what was happening, that the West Wing would be pouring over rewrites, or the earthquake changes that have happened and really rocked the world the past 5 days. Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine, defended it to his will, using cluster bombs, threatening to use nuclear weapons. Might have merited a significant rewrite, a shift in this speech, and the purpose of tonight's speech, and focus on foreign policy. But it really did feel as though there was sort of a piece of the speech that was put at the top, and then it launched into the speech that had probably been written over the last several weeks and probably a month. So he did say, he reiterated that our forces would not engage with Russia, and then it was pretty much off to the races with Build Back Better, Brett, and lower, healthcare costs, prescription drugs, corporations should pay more, all of that. He worked to correct two big issues that have plagued the Democratic Party. One is getting everybody back to school. Obviously, this has been a very difficult subject for Democrats, and led to Glenn Youngkin's victory in Virginia. He also tried to fix the defund the police situation by saying, fund them, over several times. Yeah. He tried to get that remedied.
Right.
They conveniently changed the rules for tonight so that they didn't have to wear masks. Shows you what power and influence and their attitude toward the American people. Why couldn't they have done this a long time ago? Because it wasn't in their desire.
If Vladimir Putin expands his invasion west. And he talked of unity and trying to squeeze Putin with sanctions together with these countries.
Shamefully.
Now, if you took the over on the use of the word folks or look on Fox Bet, you had a pretty good night tonight. The president touted COVID restrictions being pulled off across the country, on Capitol Hill and at the White House. Obviously, there's been a lot of skepticism about the timing of all of that days before this speech. You mentioned law enforcement funding. This is, by the way, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Let's listen in here. Just having conversations with lawmakers. Funding the police, a big applause line. Here's the thing. The president has very low approval ratings now on every major issue he talked about tonight. And there were a lot of different topics. Illegal immigration surge at the border, inflation at a 40-year high, surging crime in big cities, energy costs on the rise, even more now with Ukraine. So there was a choice this White House had. Some big new policy initiatives, or a big shift in policy, or a new sales pitch for the same policy. While there were some new projects in there, I didn't hear a big policy shift, and arguably the sales pitch is roughly the
There
same.
wasn't any
as the
policy
words,
shift.
Build Back Better legislation.
It's more the
installed
same
on
thing.
Capitol Hill. He didn't say the three words together, but talked about the same policy. This president, as he's walking out of this hall, is politically in a vulnerable place, but he's dealing on a big stage in foreign policy and a big moment for the world. Let's bring in senior political analyst Britt Hume. Good evening, Britt. Your thoughts on this speech?
Well, it reminded me of a lot of other State of the Union addresses that I've heard, and I know you and Martha have heard as well. It was very much, once he got past the Ukraine piece of it at the beginning of the speech, it was very much the kind of laundry list of initiatives and achievements and so forth that we're accustomed to hearing. And look, in some sense, that's what a president has to do in a State of the Union address. I get that. All presidents do it of both parties. But I do think, Brett, that you're onto something when you suggest that he had a chance here, had he chosen it, to do a kind of a reset for his administration growing out of the current crisis in Europe. And I think he's basically chose not to do that because he didn't want to, or he was afraid the party wouldn't agree, or it wouldn't work, or whatever. But you look at the issues that he's in trouble on. He's in trouble on inflation. He didn't really tell us anything tonight he knew about inflation that he was going to do that would afford any kind of near-term relief. He didn't really tell us anything about the border that made it clear that this continuing flood of illegal immigrants who cross the border every day, he stated some things that they would do, but there was no promise that that was originally going to get better. The lawlessness in the cities, that he talked as much about police reform as he did about crime. So that just gives you a sample of the things that are confronting him, that the public is upset about, and that he addressed in some way, but mostly in a government program style, without the promise really of immediate relief.
All right, let's bring back in our panel Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, Dana Perino, co-anchor of America's Newsroom and co-host of The Five, Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman and CEO of Empowerment and Inclusion Capital. Let's take it around the group and see what you thought. Dana, we'll start with you.
Well, let me be generous and say that there were 91 applause lines, but I have to say, I thought the speech was uninspired. I agree that it sounded like he did not actually change anything. It's almost as if they had the speech, it fell on the floor, all the pages got shuffled around, and they just put it back together, and they didn't actually reorder it. There were no transitions. There was no rhetorical lift. The strongest part of the speech was definitely the beginning and the very end. That's usually good because that's what people mostly remember. But I have to say, he goes from Ukraine straight into something that has already been given 3 Pinocchios by the Washington Post, which is a lie about the 2017 tax cuts. That it only went to help 1% of Americans. Again, that's not me saying that, that's the Washington Post with the 3 Pinocchios. I also think that he didn't say the words Build Back Better, but everything about Build Back Better was in here. We didn't hear a lot about energy independence. States of the Union addresses are supposed to be about your accomplishments, but many of their accomplishments, or what they consider accomplishments, are actually now vulnerabilities. One, I would say the American Rescue Plan, that Americans have cracked the code. They know that more spending has led to inflation. Energy policies, we see what's happened in Europe when you get too dependent on foreign sources of energy and don't produce your own, even while you're trying to transition to greener energy. I also think I have to give negative points for the mention in the same sentence of the killings of the police officers, Rivera and Mora, with this line, that he wants to hold law enforcement accountable. That's not what happened there. And there was nothing about prosecutions and making sure that career criminals are
absolutely shameful what he did.
So I tried to be generous. I actually really did. And I went into the speech thinking that maybe we'll figure out a way to find some unity. But I truly don't think that you will see anything here. I don't think there's going to be any big legislative push out of this speech. And in the meantime, Ukrainians are fighting for their lives. And we talked a lot about how we can send some things, but he also didn't end on a high note on that point, and I wish that he would have.
Speaking of Ukraine, we have oil prices now. This is from Beijing alert, surging more than $5 per barrel after the release of supplies fails to calm markets. So they hit 107 a barrel yesterday at one point, and now from the Asian markets, they're up $5 per barrel, which will affect everybody. He talked about, Harold, 60 million barrels being released from strategic reserves, including 30 million from the SPRO in the U.S. But the situation in Ukraine is dire. Big cities under attack, shelling, and people, civilians being killed by Russian aggression.
To put in context, when we talk about oil and barrels of oil, we consume 20.5 million barrels of oil a day in the United States. There are 42 gallons in a barrel that we use it for bunches of things, but that's 860 million gallons. So 70 million, 60 million, you have to put it all in context. I agree largely, a little less than 3 days. I don't necessarily disagree with the construct you drew, and I think Dana probably drew it perhaps a little more harsh than I would have, but substantially she's right. Performance art is really not the president's strength. This is so many things here, a laundry list, but there was no the coherence was, I didn't think, quite there. But I'll give him credit in 3 regards. So 3 areas where he got bipartisan applause. One was the border. Ted Cruz stood up. Crime, I did think he conflated a little bit of it, but the defunded policing, he made clear that Democrats were for funding the police. And 3, Ukraine. If he's able to craft something around that, perhaps they can get some momentum. But I would have made this a shorter speech. I would have been pithier. I would have laid out what we've accomplished, what more we have to do, and ask the entire Congress and the country, let's all give each other a break here and let's all push the reset button and try to get some things done. He didn't do that. He gave us a laundry list, and we'll see what he chooses.
And then in that, there's no acceptance of these approval numbers. There's no acceptance that he's underwater on all the things he discussed, whether it's inflation or COVID, or even foreign policy. It feels once again that the president's talking past where the country happens to be at this moment.
It did really feel to me like a meandering speech without a lot of coherence to it. I was thinking what Charles Krauthammer would have thought of this speech, and I was reminded of the line from Cicero that the engine of money is the sinews of war. In this case, he had an opportunity, I think, when it came to the energy agenda, to offer an olive branch, as Britt was saying earlier, when it came to pushing back against the left fringe of his own party on a lot of these Green New Deal-esque policies, opening up America's energy engine and putting roughnecks back to work here in America in order to really, push that back into the marketplace, lower prices for people. Instead, we get this band-aid of an oil barrel release that, as Harold says, is only going to cover, less than 3 days. It's not something that actually addresses the real problem, and I think, again, the president had an opportunity here to give a speech that could have been a reset, could have been a readjustment. Instead, we end up with a senatorial laundry list, no real run-through line, and I think at the end it's not going to really change anything in terms of his political.
Exactly right.
It's interesting that he said, he talked about made in America, right? But not
Sad.
energy, apparently.
We'll have to keep praying for him that he comes to his senses.
Why? Because
He doesn't realize where the country is.
On the ground in Ukraine.
People are hurting bad because of inflation.
Tonight, what's the latest?
The gas prices, food prices.
Well, Brett, as you said, yes, the bombardments, they really picked up today, and there's a sense that Vladimir Putin is changing, shifting his tactic. He is hitting these urban centers in an ever-increasing way, and some people have said, one U.S. official said that it's because he was suffering from logistical and supply issues, which means he is turning his tactics, he's hitting those cities now, both Kyiv as well as Kharkiv. Now, if you were listening to that speech from here, you won't have got a lot of comfort. With the air raid sirens keeping you up, with the bombs dropping, it sounded like a victory speech. It talked about the sanctions hitting Russian banks. It talked about the airspace being closed to Russian planes. It talked about Putin feeling isolated and how the US had predicted this was going to come. None of that changes the situation on the ground. And he said it with such force as if they had really achieved a victory here. We're only 6 days into this war. The bombs, they are still falling. Vladimir Putin is doubling down on this war. It just felt too early. And I think the people of Ukraine, the people I spoke to earlier, they wanted more. They wanted concrete help. They wanted an idea of how this can be stopped. I don't think they got that tonight.
Nope, they didn't, sadly.
Thank you.
No real
Great point.
meat on the bones.
It did sound like a lot had
Stop
been
buying the
accomplished, and
oil
yet
from
this is
Russia.
really just beginning for the people of Ukraine. Let's
Immediately.
bring in senior strategic analyst,
Produce
Untitled
our own
Chapter,
oil and
Jen,
gas
great to have you with us
to
tonight.
get the energy
What was your
prices down.
reaction to the Kiev part of this speech, or the Ukraine part, I should say?
I hope you enjoyed this Travels with John Stephenson. Filmed it for you so you can see for yourselves. Make your own opinions. God bless you all. Red, yellow, brown, black, and white. We're all precious in Jesus' sight.
But I thought he really missed
Remember, are you ready?
Squandered.
Ready for the
to
Lord.
talk to Putin,
It's the Holy
and also
Spirit's
talk
job
the
to convict.
Ukrainian
It's
people,
God's job to
given
judge.
Putin's
It's
invasion
our
of
job to
Ukraine,
love.
What he should
And
have
I love
just
you
said
all.
unequivocally, we are not going to let this stand. We intend to assist the Ukrainians resist this invasion with everything that we can. And we're also going to assist them to drive all the Russian troops off their land for as long as it takes. Let the Ukrainians know that they were staying with them. And I thought there's another opportunity. We're going to have likely a humanitarian catastrophe on our hands as they bomb these cities and encircle them, and the amount of death and hardship that's going to take place inside of them. He should have set a stage for that and said, the humanitarian crisis is possibly coming. I'm going to ask the United Nations and our allies and partners to support the United Nations and lead an effort to relieve the human suffering that's going to take place. Those are two essential points I think needed to be made here, and particularly the first one, going right to the Ukrainian people and going right to Putin to let him know this is much more than about sanctions. And we're going to stay there and help these people for as long as it takes.
General, because
That's
it's
what he should have done.
That we are
He missed
coming
the
to a
boat,
crucial time in this
unfortunately.
war, where Russian forces are, it looks like, trying to encircle these big cities, and we could be seeing some images that we haven't seen on the world stage, with civilians getting killed, and a lot of it happening on camera. I mean, we are preparing for what could be very ugly on the ground in Ukraine.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, Brett. I mean, there's encirclement is going to take place in Kyiv. They're beginning it right now from the west. They will put in their area bombs and artillery. They will not use precision weapons because they want to topple and crumble the city. That's also going to take place in Kharkiv. And the people will be trapped in there, and they will not be able to get the medical assistance they need. They may not be able to get water. The power will be shut off. This is a significant humanitarian crisis that will take place. And you're right, we haven't seen that since 2015 plus in Aleppo and also in Idlib province. But the media was not there, Brett. So we never got to see Russia's carpet bombing, destroying entire neighborhoods, entire towns and villages, using penetration bombs to bomb underground hospitals.
Shameful what they're doing. Shame on Russian people for tolerating what Putin's doing.
Rather regrettably and tragically.
But General, there's still a feeling in this country and with this administration that there's not going to be additional U.S. involvement. They're very clear, the president was very clear about U.S. forces not being in Ukraine. But as those pictures come out, and as that emotion stirs about what's happening on the ground, do you sense there's a different thing that's going to happen in this country?
No, I think there's much we can do. First of all, he didn't even make a commitment to give them all the arms and ammunition that they need. That's what I'm talking about. He didn't make a commitment to assist them if this government gets toppled, like it's likely going to do, and the Ukrainian military is defeated. You know full well what's going to happen here. The Ukrainian people are going to rise up. We should have made a commitment to them to assist them in that. I wouldn't expect him to say publicly that there are some things that we can do covertly to assist the Ukrainian people. I'm not suggesting he would do that, but I'm hoping that he's talking to essential intelligence agencies and Title 50 in terms of what we can do actually now to assist. There's risk associated with that. I'm not suggesting that there's not. But there are things that we can do, and we have done them in the past, and we got the people to help.
Okay, General Keane, thank you very much.
We're going to take a quick break.
Thank you, General. You are absolutely right. I'd like to close this with a little prayer, if I may. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever and ever. Amen. God bless you all. Say prayers for the Ukrainian people and watch over them and protect them, Lord, and protect our soldiers wherever they are, and help us all to lift up prayers to protect them and stop this terrible, terrible assassinations by these powerful dictatorships who could care less about what you're doing, Lord, in people's lives. We appreciate your help. Amen.
The disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal did more than cost American lives. It betrayed our allies and emboldened our enemies. North Korea is testing missiles again at an alarming rate. The Speaker of the House recently warned our Olympic athletes not to speak out against China. And now Russia has launched an unprovoked, full-scale military invasion of Ukraine, an attack on democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. Now all Americans must stand united in solidarity with the brave people of Ukraine as they courageously defend their country against Putin's tyranny as they fight for their freedom. But we shouldn't ignore what happened in the run-up to Putin's invasion, waiving sanctions on Russian pipelines while eliminating oil production here at home, focusing on political correctness rather than military readiness, reacting to world events instead of driving them. Weakness on the world stage has a cost, and the president's approach to foreign policy has consistently been too little, too late. It's time for America to once again project confidence. It's time to be decisive. It's time to lead. But we can't project strength abroad if we're weak at home. And that's what I want to discuss with you tonight. The President and Democrats in Congress have spent the last year either ignoring the issues facing Americans or making them worse. They were warned that spending trillions would lead to soaring inflation. They were told that their anti-energy policies would send gas prices to new heights, but they plowed ahead anyway, raising the price at the pump by 50% and pushing inflation to a 40-year high. 4 decades ago, when our nation was last reeling from inflation, I was a young working mom just starting out. My husband Kevin worked days while I watched our girls, and then we would literally switch. We would pass in the yard as he was coming home, and I was leaving to work evenings at the local grocery store. From across that checkout counter, I saw the pain of inflation on my neighbors' faces. I saw what happens when prices rise faster than wages. The Biden administration believes inflation is a, quote, high-class problem. I can tell you, it's an everybody problem. I saw moms and dads' paychecks buy them less and less. I watched working people choose which essentials to take home and which ones to leave behind. And now President Biden's decisions have a whole new generation feeling that same pain. When I took the oath of office 5 years ago, I promised Iowans that I would never lose sight of who I was working for, that I wouldn't become detached from the problems they were facing, from the problems that I had faced myself. But you don't have to check groceries to see what high inflation does to people. You just need to step outside of the DC bubble. Talk to Americans about what's on their mind.
Absolutely.
Ask them, what are your concerns? What keeps you up at night? And they'll tell you. And I can tell you what's not on that list. They won't tell you that spending trillions more and bankrupting their children is the answer to their problems. They won't tell you that we should be paying people not to work. And they certainly won't tell you that we should give billions in tax giveaways to millionaires and billionaires in Democrat-controlled states like California, New York, and New Jersey. But that's what the Biden administration has been pushing for over the last year. And that's all part of Build Back Better. Thankfully, the president's agenda didn't pass because even members of his own party said enough is enough. Well, the American people share that view. Enough is enough.
Right.
And it's not just with DC spending. Americans are tired of a political class trying to remake this country into a place where an elite few tell everyone else what they can and cannot say,
Right.
what they can and cannot believe. They're tired of people pretending the way to end racism is by categorizing everybody by their race. They're tired of politicians who tell parents they should sit down, be silent, and let government control their kids' education and future. Frankly, they are tired of the theater, where politicians do one thing when the cameras are rolling and another when they believe you can't see them. Where governors and mayors enforce mandates but don't follow them. Where elected leaders tell their citizens to stay home while they sneak off to Florida for sun and fun.
Mm-hmm.
Where they demand that your child wear a mask, but they go maskless. So you've heard the excuses. They were just holding their breath. But it's the American people who are waiting to exhale, waiting for the insanity to stop. We now live in a country where violent crime is out of control. Liberal prosecutors are letting criminals off easy, and many prominent Democrats still want to defund the police. You know, it seems like everything is backwards. The Biden administration requires vaccines for Americans who want to go to work or protect this country, but not for migrants who illegally cross the border. The Department of Justice treats parents like domestic terrorists, but looters and shoplifters roam free. The American people are left to feel like they're the enemy. This is not the same country it was a year ago. The president tried to paint a different picture tonight, but his actions over the last 12 months don't match the rhetoric.
That's right.
It's not what he promised when he took office. But it doesn't have to be that way. There is an alternative. Across the nation, Republican governors and legislators are showing Americans what conservative leadership looks like, what it means to respect the people we serve, to hear them out, to stand up for them and walk alongside them. We know that our problems require bold action, but we also know that bold action doesn't have to mean government action. It's Americans making their own decisions for their own families and future. Republican governors face the same COVID-19 virus head-on. But we honored your freedoms and saw right away that lockdowns and school closures, they came with their own significant cost.
That's right.
That mandates weren't the answer. And we actually listened to the science, especially with kids in masks and kids in schools. What happened and is still happening to our children over the last 2 years is unconscionable. Learning loss, isolation, anxiety, depression. In so many states, our kids have been left behind, and so many will never catch up. That's why Iowa was the first state in the nation to require that schools open their doors. I was attacked by the left, I was attacked by the media, but it wasn't a hard choice. It was the right choice. And keeping schools open is only the start of the pro-parent, pro-family revolution that Republicans are leading in Iowa and states across this country. Republicans believe that parents matter. It was true before the pandemic, and it has never been more important to say out loud. Parents matter. They have a right to know.
That's right.
And to have a say in what their kids are being taught.
Absolutely.
Families also have
And what
every
books they're
right
presented
to live in a
with.
safe and a secure community. And that begins with a safe and secure country. But the Biden administration has refused to secure our border. They've refused to provide the resources to stop human trafficking.
Right.
To stop the staggering influx of deadly drugs coming into our neighborhoods. They've refused to protect you. With Texas and Arizona leading the way, I, along with Republican governors from several states, have sent resources to the border. And we've actually gone to the border, something that our president and vice president have yet to do since taking office. On the economy, the contrast couldn't be more stark. While Democrats in D.C. are spending trillions, sending inflation soaring, Republican leaders around the country are balancing budgets and cutting taxes, because we know that money spent on Main Street is better than money spent on bureaucracy. Today, I signed legislation that eliminates Iowa's tax on retirement income and sets our tax rate at 3.9%. That's less than half of what it was just 4 years ago. And it shouldn't come as a surprise that out of the top 20 states with the lowest unemployment rates, 17 have Republican governors. Republicans may not have the White House, but we're doing what we can to fill the leadership vacuum. And on the issues that are affecting Americans, Republicans are leading. We're standing up for parents and kids. We're standing up for life. We're keeping our communities safe and thanking those in uniform. We're fighting to restore America's energy independence, and that includes biofuels. We're getting people back to work, not paying them to stay home. Most of all, we're respecting your freedom. Behind me stands Iowa's Capitol, where we display our state motto, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. And those aren't just empty words. It's a belief that the greatness of this state and this country lies in our people, not government. You shouldn't have to wake up every morning and worry about the next thing the government is going to do to you, your business, or your children. If we as elected leaders are doing our job, then the government is working well, but operating in the background. It's supporting the ingenuity and spirit of our people, not drowning them out. It's keeping them safe, not restricting their freedom.
Kim Reynolds,
That's what I believe, that's
Iowa
what
governor.
Republicans believe, and that's what Republicans are doing. I am so blessed to be the governor of Iowa, where people are humble, hardworking, and patriotic. We take care of each other. And yes, we are, as they say, Iowa nice. But you don't have to be from Iowa to see that those are the values of America at its best. All of America. Over the last few years, I've put my faith in Iowans, and they haven't let me down. I encourage this president to do the same, to put his faith in you, the American people, who have never wavered in your belief in this country, regardless of who leads it. Because you know, you've shown that the soul of America isn't about who lives in the White House. It's men and women like you in every corner of this nation who are willing to step up and take responsibility for your communities, for your neighbors, and ultimately for yourselves. By that most important measure at least, the state of our union is indeed strong. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Republican governor from Iowa, Kim Reynolds, who is really sailing to re-election in 2022. She has an approval rating above 80% among Republicans in Iowa. Iowa, of course, the first in the nation caucus state, standing in front of the state capitol with the sound of a train going by in the Midwest way that she presented it. And basically, this presentation, very humble, but kind of a blueprint for Republicans, both on foreign policy, mentioning Afghanistan and what she called the horrible withdrawal there, as well as going into how Republicans see every major issue and how they line up against Democrats. This is for any response, whether it's the Democratic response to the Republican, Republican to a Democrat.
Well, that was good. She was good.
It's never going
Really
to be the
good.
same as
I want to come to bed.
Okay.
I don't want to be on live while I'm in my own bed.
Okay, you won't
So
be
you're
on
not
live.
You're not going to film these
No,
other people
I'm not
turn
gonna
the
film.
phone off.
Before,
I want it off before I lay down.
Well, I'll say one thing, when it came to education, I think she probably caught the ears
Seriously.
of a lot of those
Okay.
moms, the CLERGY
Now.
moms that we talked about. She said
Turn it
exactly
off, you
what
say?
they wanted to
Off.
hear, and we didn't
We'll
hear
try
that
to do that
from the
right now. I
president
gotta
because
figure out
he
what to